It is time for the next really exciting part of the build, and that is to put a coating of waterproof mortar over the top. So we're aiming to put about 30 mils over the top of this whole structure, and that will set and cure, and then we will get a waterproof coating over the top. Now I've done a few things in the meantime. I have swept around the place to get rid of any loose dust, and then I have added a masking tape line all the way around the oven so I can start to create my curves and know where I'm going to land. I don't want to be bringing the waterproof mortar right out to the edge. I want to leave a good amount on the side for the other coats that are going to go on. You can use a tape measure to measure off each side with the masking tape just to make sure you're happy that the oven is balanced. So when we apply this mortar, this is going to give us a guide of where we need to go to. It doesn't need to be a firm guide, it just needs to be that we don't put the mortar on too thick and that we start to create that beautiful curve that we're after. So what I'm then going to do is take my little cloth, a damp cloth, and just wipe around this edge here so that it's nice and clean. We want it as clean as possible so the mortar coat that we're putting on top really adheres to the concrete that we've got there. As we go, we're also going to be adding water, so just painting on a bit of water there, and that'll stop the concrete drawing too much water out of the mortar before it's had a chance to set, and will help the two connect as well. So we're going to get stuck in and mix up some of the waterproof mortar now. It's a little bit more forgiving than the fire mortar in terms of set time, so that's good. Now pour the water in first, then add your mortar mix, just saves it sticking to the bottom, and then put in a third of the remaining amount of the fibres that you've got in your bag. So it's an important part. These little fibres are going to help stop the mortar from slumping when it's in place. If it's a bit thick in one area, it can slump and sort of crack. So these are really going to help to avoid that. Now don't forget your dust mask. Last thing you want to do is give your mortar a germ. So make sure you wear that when you're mixing up. We're going to mix it, and then we're going to let it sit for 5 minutes, and then we're going to mix it again, and then we're going to start applying, and when we're 2/3 of the way through that bucket, we'll mix the next one. Now with this mortar, you can actually use a concrete mixer or something if you've got. So I'm going to get stuck in, I'm going to remix this bucket now, and I'm going to start applying some. So if you've got any concerns about the product being difficult to mix, you can see it's really quite sloppy. So it's at the mix ratio we're using with the water, it's quite easy to hand mix. The biggest thing is to get those fibres worked really well into the material, and then to let it sit for that 5 minutes and then really work it hard again before we put it on. You'll see on the spade here, if I can get that in focus, you can see those little spurs or little hairs off the side. That's the little fibres sticking to the spade. So they're mixed all through this brew now, and they will help it to avoid slumping. So I have re-agitated the mix, and I'm now going to start using the spade to lob it onto the oven there. So I'm going to gently place, not so much of a throw, and then I'll start working it with the plastic trowel. And one thing I'll just cover off, I did actually add this masking tape up in here. It just means that the flue doesn't get as dirty for wiping down later on. And I also wanted to demonstrate what you would do if you were looking to rebake the mortar back a little bit so you can see the top of the fire brick, which is quite a common look for pizza ovens. You just mask that off now just to keep it clean and tidy ready, but we're not going to do that today. Now what you don't want to do is end up putting it on too thick in one spot and then working it out and finding that you've become uneven from the other side. So just be a little bit careful about how much you initially put on. Now I know some of you might be fearful about doing plastering work and that sort of thing, but I can tell you this is not a difficult process at all. You'll see how easily it just sort of wheels around. And we'll start throwing more and more on. Now don't forget, we're going to wet down this bottom area here before we put our mortar onto it. So if you're working in really hot conditions, obviously it can dry off pretty fast. Doesn't need to be a huge amount, just as long as it's sort of dampish once it hits it. Don't want any ponding water or anything like that. If you slice off thinner amounts rather than big heavy blobs, you don't want a massive clump like that. What you want is just a thinner amount that you can splat on. That's about as much as I want to do before I start working it on. So I'm not holding my tongue in a funny way, I'm literally just pushing this stuff around. So she's a real easy material to work with. I can see I've got a little bit of a hole up there, I'm not going to scrape too much off. Just add some in there now and you'll see all the different fibres, all the fibres in the actual material now. So they're helping us to do that. Now when you get to the bottom bit, it's a little bit hard to do the spade, so chuck it in there, wiggle it underneath the oven. So really want to pack it in underneath there, into that little gap that we've got, and work it up so that you connect it with the top. Now I'm not a plasterer by trade, I'm just lopping it on, wiggling it on underneath there and then connecting it up to the top. You can see that started to fall down on me there, but once I lob a little bit more on and connect it up, and that mesh is going to work to help stop the plaster from falling down. You can see it's all starting to take shape. Now I can see from my tape line I've gone too heavy on the material there, so I can just literally work it back with the trowel to get that nice curve. If I didn't have that curve, I'd be a little bit unsure that I'm going to be able to get the other side the same. So you'll see just how easily that works on. Now whatever you do, I hope you're not working in the sunshine, because it just makes this process a nightmare. So I'm going to leave you there for a sec, because I'm going to go and mix the next bucket, because I've used up 2/3 of this, and I will see you back when I have done that. I've just been chugging away, just did a bit of work up the top here. I've still got a bit of tidying up, which I'll show you. Just want to once again show you how easy it is to spread it up. Just a quick cautionary note, be careful of the bits that fall on the concrete here. They become very brittle and sort of dusty very quickly as the water gets sucked out of that concrete. So, sorry, out of the mortar into the concrete. So just a little bit of tidying up here to do. I can see I just need a little bit of an extra blob. But I'm certainly not doing anything special here. And in a minute I'm going to introduce you to the Curvinator 3000. It's basically the DIYer's dream come true when it comes to doing plastering work like this. So just on these sides, boom, spread it up, spread it up. You can see it's not falling off, nothing's happening. I'm not doing anything special because we've got our mix right. If we put too much water in there, it'd be absolutely hopeless. So it would just be falling off. If we didn't put enough, it wouldn't be workable. Alright. Just need to make sure I'm putting some water on as I go. I get too far ahead of myself. Now over here I actually pulled my tape out. That's it hanging down there because it was the mortar was sort of hanging over by about 1/3 onto the tape, and I didn't want to not be able to pull it out once it had all set off. Now unfortunately, just missing off the video here is the addition of the rear vent for the oven. Now this is nestled into the insulation right at the rear of the oven, and the end of the vent sits back on a concrete slab. So refer to the written instructions for how to put this in, but it's very simple. It just gets nestled in there before you add the waterproof mortar. Here you'll see the vent after the oven's completed, so you'll understand if there's ever a pressure build up in that insulation, might get a bit of dampness in there or something, it can vent out there. So that's the reason we put that in. So I really just want to quickly take you through what we're doing up around the flue here and around the arch bricks. I've just thrown some newspaper in there in case things get a little bit messy, just to save those fire bricks from getting dirty. But what I've done is just put mortar up along this edge and just pushed it up into place. So it's really simple, the product to work with, and I can easily just push that up there. You can see it's not slumping in. There was a little bulge up here earlier, but I just gently worked that out, no problem at all. And I'm just working my way around the top. I'm going to have a bit of a top platform up here, I guess you call it. I'm going to make sure that both sides look even. So I'll step back from the oven just to make sure. So really jam it down there so we get a good bond around our flue. Easy as that. I'm seriously doing nothing special. There's nothing too difficult about this plastering at all. It'll all just push in and stay in place. So I've gone over the whole oven now. Now, just depending on how much mortar you use around here, it might get quite thick. You're probably looking at about 20-25 mils over this area here. So just gauge as you go that you've got enough material to cover the whole oven. Now I'm going to introduce you to the Curvinator 3000. This is our own invention, and it's designed specifically to put the curve over the back of the pizza oven. So I'm going to show you how it works. But essentially, you hold it from those two handles. You can get a bit more power by getting your thumbs in there. And you hold it here, and then you wiggle it up the structure. I can bring this around here. So I'm using that bottom edge to create it. So essentially now, I can go up like that, and look at that, that is just coming out beautifully. So I've left a bit of stuff in my bucket, just over here, that I can put into that gap there. Now this isn't a finishing tool, it's purely a shaping tool. So it won't give us the perfect finish, we're not going to use it for the last layer to give us the perfect finish. But as you can see, I can very rapidly work my way around the oven, and it can highlight for me any high points or low points. So I've got a bit of a low point through there. So I'm just going to put a little bit in here. Just like that, making sure it's nice and smooth around the bottom there, staying within my masking tape lines. I'm not going right to the back, I'm making sure I'm leaving enough room at the back there for the next layers of plaster. So this, I can then, so it's just using that bottom edge and putting probably about 4 or 5 kilos of pressure on it, and it's just that scissor action that will really start to work in and give us the shape that we want. Now I don't really care about little spots like that. I mean, we can get in and put a blob on, but this isn't the final coat. This is just to make sure we have a nice finish to this particular coat so that the next one is easier. Now when we come round to this area here, we can curve this in that way, so we can create the shape we want by just simply curving it in the other way. And you'll find your way with how much pressure to put on. And we can just get a real nice curve, real nice finish going to this oven. Just sort of cut in there, but wiggle it back up. And I can work my way around the other side there. And I can see I just need to build that up. Because of my hexagon, I've got a little bit of a concave spot there, a little bit of a flat spot, so I'm going to build that up a bit more. And I can just put it right down the bottom edge. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. Absolute genius. You can see I've got a little spot there, so I'm just going to work a bit more into there. Right, and I'm going to make my way around the other side of the oven and do the same. I can see it looks a little bit rough there, so I'll just use my trowel just to tidy that up. Honestly, it doesn't matter, we're going to come back in a second and rough it all up anyway. Now I can sort of see a shadow of some mesh there, so I'm not worried about that, that's fine, a little bit of shadowing is fine, as long as it's all sort of covered, that's the main thing we're looking for. I'm looking good around the top here, I can just give that a little bit of a run over. And one of the biggest things I'm doing is stepping back and having a look at the oven to make sure I've got an even coat. The danger of using a spade, and you may just want to use the trowel only to put it on, is that you put big lumps on and then you have a big bulge on one side of the oven. We want a nice symmetrical oven, so stand well back from it on all angles and make sure you're really happy with the way it's looking. So I'll work my way around the other side and then I will show you the next little trip to getting this coat finished. Now what you can find is that your material starts to go dry reasonably quickly, especially if you're outside. So sometimes just to do the last little finishing bits, little touches and things like that, you can use a metal sort of scraper like this and just work your way around, neat and tidy. Doesn't need to be perfect, don't forget we're getting 3 more coats of plaster on this, but the better this is, just like with the mesh, just like with the insulation, the easier it is for the coat that goes on top. So if you find, for example, you look at your front and one side's a bit lopsided, what you can do is you can just put your little scraper on the side and just slice it off like that. So while this mortar is sort of setting off, it's quite easy to work with. And you just work your way around, and like I say, one of the most important things is step back and have a look at the oven and make sure you're happy. Don't overwork the material. Once you're happy, leave it, and you can go around and just scrape off any loose bits that have fallen onto your concrete slab there just while they're setting, and take your tape off as well. So run this round. If it cuts in underneath the mortar like it has there, I'm just going to get my little thing and just tidy it up, squash that back down so it's all neat and tidy. But we don't want to leave it there because if it sits on top of it, you obviously can't pull it out. So yeah, that's it. We are back in a little while just to start creating some indentations over the oven itself so the next coat can adhere. Now one thing I just realised that I didn't show you when I was doing the build here was something that is very, very important. Even if you forget your anniversary, make sure you remember to do this. So make sure you set the flue up straight. So check on that side, check on that side. If you need to lever it one way, just lever it across and pack that mortar in there. So squish it in there until it comes right. If you adjust one side, check the other side again. Because once that's set, that's it. There is no way we are going to be able to move that flue again. So very, very important. Please don't forget to do that. So I've had a bit of a clean up and just sort of picked up, well, there's a loose bit I missed, but I've had a good sweep up and a general clean around the area. I've made sure there's no mortar sitting on the insulation bricks inside the oven which might mark it. Don't want that to happen. Now because we're using a waterproof mortar and we're putting another layer of plaster on top of this, what we need to do is create something for the next layer to stick to. It's especially important as soon as this sets, it actually becomes waterproof. Now a professional plasterer would use something like this, and it just leaves an impression in the actual mortar so that when we put the next coat on, it's got something to stick to. There's only probably 3 people in the world who have one of these, so let's use a fork. So ordinary fork, and we're putting it back down, and we can just run it around and make our way. It's just enough to make an indentation, so you don't want to pick up any plaster. We don't dig it in that way, we just keep running it this way until we have covered the oven. So we're going to do everywhere, do up here, at the top, around the front, all that sort of thing. It's really important for us to have something for that next coat to stick to. So you can do that pretty much straight away, and once we've done that, we're then going to wrap it in the plastic film again. So I'll just go through and mark this now and we'll do the plastic film. Right, this is the last little part for this section of the pizza oven. wrap it in cling film. So just like we did on the first fire mortar, we want to make sure it's all wrapped up and it can't lose the moisture that it needs for that chemical reaction to happen. So vital when it's outside. Now if you are outside and it's a bit blowy, bit of wind, you can cover it with a damp light coloured cloth. Please don't use a dark coloured cloth, it'll just superheat it and we won't get the best out of the mortar. So one of the areas that we really want it to set properly is round the flue. So I've completely wrapped that in plastic and then I've actually wrapped some insulation, also some masking tape around to hold that in place. Don't go squishing it down because we will lose those marks that you've scored in there with the fork, and we don't want to do that. So this time it's just quite loose, and you probably will need to put those light coloured towels or sheet or whatever you're going to put on it to hold it all in place. Super important. We can start work on the next coat the next day, provided it's not too cold. If it's normal setting conditions, we can get into it tomorrow. So let's look forward to that. If you want to wait a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that doesn't matter as well. So this now is, once it's set, will be waterproof, so your oven's sealed, which is a great step. Just a quick note to make sure you cover all round the front of the oven there. So make sure the plastic comes all the way down because we want this area here to set really well. And there's a close view of the cling wrap around there with the masking tape there. So yeah, all good.